Your kindness might be destroying you. Every act of compassion, every moment you choose to be good, it could be the very thing keeping you weak, mediocre, trapped in a life that isn't truly yours. The smile you wear, the help you offer, the sacrifices you make, what if they're not virtues at all, but invisible chains? Have you ever noticed how being the good person leaves you exhausted, how helping others somehow makes you feel empty? You smile, you give, you sacrifice, and deep down something feels wrong. You're not alone in this feeling. In fact, you might be one of the few brave enough to admit what millions secretly know but can't say. Being good is a prison. It's that gnawing sensation when you say yes but mean no, when you help someone who never helps themselves, when you dim your light so others won't feel threatened by your brightness. This might be the most dangerous truth you'll ever hear. What I'm about to share has been buried for over a century because it threatens everything society needs you to believe. It challenges the very foundation of how we're taught to live, love, and relate to each other. Once you understand this, you'll see the invisible chains that bind not just you, but everyone around you. And more importantly, you'll understand why breaking free from goodness might be the most moral thing you ever do. This isn't about becoming cruel or selfish. It's about something far more profound. It's about discovering what real strength looks like when it's no longer apologizing for itself. In 1882, a German philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche made a discovery that would shake the foundations of Western civilization. Walking through the streets of Genoa, watching people perform their daily acts of kindness, he suddenly saw through the illusion. What everyone called virtue, he recognized as weakness. What they called morality, he saw as a clever trap. He spent the next 8 years documenting exactly how this trap works, and more importantly, how to escape it. His insights were so threatening to the established order that they tried to bury his work, dismiss him as mad, anything to prevent people from understanding what he'd uncovered about the psychology of human morality. Let me tell you what this means for your life right now. By the end of this, you'll never see your own kindness the same way. You'll understand why your goodness might be a mask for something darker. But here's what nobody tells you. Recognizing this trap is only the first step. The real question is, are you ready to become who you truly are? Are you prepared to see why everything you've been taught about being a good person might be the very thing preventing you from being a great one? In the summer of 1882, Nietzsche was walking through the Italian coastal town of Rapallo when he witnessed something that would crystallize years of suspicion. A wealthy merchant was distributing coins to beggars, basking in their gratitude. But Nietzsche noticed something others missed: the subtle look of satisfaction, even superiority, on the merchant's face. The way he positioned himself so others would see his generosity. The beggars trained to perform gratitude, playing their role perfectly. This, Nietzsche wrote in his notebook that evening, is not virtue. It is power wearing the mask of kindness. You see, Nietzsche had been struggling with illness his entire adult life. Devastating headaches, near blindness, stomach ailments that left him bedridden for days. He knew suffering intimately. And he'd noticed something peculiar. Those who pitied him most were often the ones who seemed to need his weakness. They fed off his pain, not to heal it, but to feel superior to it. This realization led him to a terrifying question. What if everything we call good is actually a sophisticated form of control? What if morality itself is a weapon wielded by the weak against the strong? Now, I want to be very clear about something. Nietzsche wasn't advocating for cruelty or selfishness. He was exposing something far more disturbing: the hidden psychology behind our highest values. The way kindness can be a cage, built by those who benefit from your diminishment. He saw how those who couldn't create, who couldn't build, who couldn't rise through their own strength, had mastered a different art, the art of making the strong feel guilty for their gifts. They couldn't climb the mountain, so they convinced those at the peak that height itself was immoral. This same pattern exists today, perhaps more powerfully than ever. We've been taught from birth that being good is the highest goal. Be kind, be compassionate, put others first. Help those in need. These commands are so deeply embedded that questioning them feels like blasphemy. But think about this. Who benefits when you constantly put others before yourself? Who gains power when you suppress your ambitions in the name of being nice? Society operates on a kind of unspoken agreement. The exceptional must dim their light so the mediocre don't feel threatened. We live in a culture that's weaponized compassion. You're told that feeling bad for others makes you good, that sacrificing your potential for someone else's comfort makes you virtuous. It's like we're all swimming in an ocean of false morality, and most people don't even realize they're drowning. The truly insidious part? This programming runs so deep that you police yourself. You feel guilty for wanting more. You apologize for your strength. You hide your power because displaying it might make others uncomfortable. You've internalized your own cage. You've become both the prisoner and the guard, enforcing limitations that no external force could ever impose as effectively. But what if I told you that this entire moral framework, everything you've been taught about kindness, compassion, and being good, is actually a form of psychological slavery designed by those who fear human greatness? What if your guilt is not a sign of virtue, but evidence of how thoroughly you've been programmed? What if the voice in your head telling you to be smaller, quieter, less ambitious isn't your conscience at all, but the internalized demands of those who need you to stay weak so they can feel strong? The first thing Nietzsche discovered was that goodness operates like a virus. It spreads by making strength look like sickness and weakness look like health. Those who lack the power to create, to build, to rise, instead master the art of making the powerful feel guilty for their gifts. You see, conventional morality is like a river that only flows in one direction, downward. It pulls everyone toward the lowest common denominator. Think about water seeking its level, always flowing toward the easiest path, eroding mountains into valleys over time. Here's how it works. Someone with less capability, less drive, less vision, encounters someone with more. Instead of admitting this difference, which would require painful honesty, they perform a brilliant psychological maneuver. They redefine the terms. Suddenly, ambition becomes greed. Strength becomes insensitivity. Excellence becomes showing off. The person with gifts starts to doubt themselves. Maybe I am being selfish, they think. Maybe I should tone it down. And piece by piece, they dismantle their own greatness to make others comfortable. The mediocre don't have to pull anyone down. They've convinced the exceptional to do it themselves. This is what Nietzsche called slave morality, not because it was practiced by literal slaves, but because it enslaves the human spirit. It takes our highest drives and turns them into sources of shame. You've felt this, haven't you? The guilt that comes with wanting more than others? The shame of outgrowing people who supported you? That's the mechanism at work. Nietzsche observed this pattern throughout history. He studied how early Christianity transformed Roman virtues into sins. Where Romans valued strength, pride, and conquest, the new morality praised meekness, humility, and surrender. The meek shall inherit the earth. Nietzsche saw this as the ultimate inversion. Those who couldn't conquer in reality conquered the minds of the conquerors. They made strength feel guilty for being strong. He wrote about watching a brilliant student in Basel dim their intelligence to fit in with classmates. The student had been vibrant, questioning, alive with ideas. But constant pressure to be humble, to think of others, to not make waves slowly crushed that spirit. By the end of the term, they were indistinguishable from everyone else. I watched a soul murder itself with kindness, Nietzsche wrote, and everyone applauded the corpse for being so considerate. This shows up in your life when you apologize for your success, when you downplay your achievements so friends don't feel bad, when you stay in relationships or jobs that drain you because leaving would be selfish, when you give until you're empty because being good means having nothing left for yourself. If you've ever felt guilty for being happy when others are struggling, you've experienced this programming. If you've ever hidden your gifts to maintain relationships with people who resent those gifts, you know exactly what Nietzsche was warning about. The mechanism is brilliant because it makes you complicit in your own diminishment. You become both prisoner and guard, enforcing limitations that no external force could impose. You call it being good. Nietzsche called it voluntary slavery. But that's not the most profound part. The real tragedy isn't that this morality makes individuals smaller. It's what happens to the human spirit when weakness becomes sacred and strength becomes sin. Because when you understand what Nietzsche discovered next, you'll see why this isn't just about personal freedom. It's about the future of human consciousness itself. Now, you might be thinking, but helping others feels good. Compassion is what makes us human. And you're right, but not in the way you think. What Nietzsche exposed wasn't that kindness is always wrong, but that most of what passes for kindness is actually something else entirely. Here's the paradox that changes everything. Your wounds might be your greatest gift, but only if you transform them into strength rather than weaponize them as weakness. Think of it this way. A broken vase can become two things. It can remain shattered, demanding others walk carefully around its sharp edges, making its brokenness everyone else's problem. Or those cracks can be filled with gold, making it more beautiful and valuable than before. The Japanese call this kintsugi, the art of precious scars. But our morality teaches us to leave the vase broken. Worse, it teaches us to be proud of our brokenness, to display our wounds as badges of virtue. Look how much I've suffered, we say, as if pain were an achievement rather than a starting point. Nietzsche saw this everywhere. Moses couldn't speak fluently, yet became the greatest prophet. Beethoven went deaf, yet composed his most transcendent music in silence. But notice, they didn't celebrate their limitations. They transformed them into gateways to greatness. The difference? They refused to let their wounds become their identity. They didn't seek pity. They sought power over their conditions. Not power over others, but the kind of power that turns lead into gold, suffering into strength, limitation into liberation. When you weaponize your weakness through false kindness, you rob yourself of this transformation. You remain forever the broken vase, cutting others with your edges while demanding they call your sharpness sensitivity. Here's what happens when you begin to see through the trap of conventional goodness. First, you feel guilt, intense, crushing guilt. Your programming screams that you're becoming bad, selfish, cruel. This is the guardian at the gate, the last defense of a morality that needs you weak. Then comes anger. Pure, clean anger at the years you've wasted diminishing yourself, at the people who benefited from your smallness, at the society that taught you to apologize for your gifts. This anger is sacred. It's your life force finally defending itself. Next, you'll feel alone. Because as you stop playing the game of false kindness, those who fed on your weakness will call you changed, arrogant, not the person I knew. They're right. You're not that person anymore. You're becoming who you actually are. But then something miraculous happens. You start to feel your own power returning. It's like blood flowing back into a limb that's been asleep, painful at first, then electric with possibility. You realize you can choose kindness from strength rather than compulsion from weakness. Your compassion becomes precise, powerful, transformative, not the watered-down pity that keeps everyone comfortable in their cages. You discover what Nietzsche called the great health, not the absence of suffering, but the strength to transform suffering into fuel for becoming. You stop asking, "Am I good?" and start asking, "Am I growing?" You stop seeking approval and start seeking authenticity. The danger is this. If you don't understand this process, you'll either remain trapped in false goodness or swing to the opposite extreme of genuine cruelty. Both are escapes from the real challenge. Becoming strong enough to be truly kind, powerful enough to be genuinely generous, authentic enough to help others find their own strength rather than feeding on their weakness. Most people can't handle this tension. They either collapse back into conventional morality, convincing themselves their cage is comfortable, or they use Nietzsche as an excuse for narcissism, missing his deeper message entirely. The real test is whether you can hold the paradox, rejecting the morality that keeps you weak while developing the strength to create new values. Whether you can be hard enough to break your chains and soft enough to help others break theirs, not through pity, but through example. There are 5 types of false kindness that Nietzsche identified, 5 ways that being good becomes a trap. Each one seems virtuous on the surface, but understanding their true nature is like having a map of the prison you've been living in. Once you can recognize these patterns, you can't unsee them, in yourself or in others. Number 1. The kindness of superiority. This is kindness that needs an audience, that positions the giver above the receiver. You've seen it, the person who makes sure everyone knows about their charity, who tells stories of their generosity at every opportunity. But it's subtler too. It's in the slight condescension when helping someone, the unspoken message of, "I'm better than you because I can give and you need." Nietzsche watched this in the salons of Europe, where wealthy patrons would help struggling artists while keeping them dependent. The kindness maintained the hierarchy. The artist remained grateful, inferior, controlled. True strength would have been to empower them to no longer need help. Number 2. The kindness of avoidance. This is being nice to avoid conflict, keeping peace at any cost. It's agreeing when you disagree, smiling when you're angry, helping when you want to refuse. This kindness is cowardice wearing a moral costume. It fears the discomfort of authenticity more than the slow death of dishonesty. You do this when you say yes to commitments that drain you, when you maintain friendships that expired years ago, when you bite your tongue to keep a false peace. Nietzsche called this the small lies that murder the soul. Number 3. The kindness of manipulation. This uses compassion as currency, creating debts that must be repaid. After all I've done for you becomes a weapon. Gifts come with invisible strings. Help creates obligation. The kindness is real, but so is the hidden agenda. Control through indebtedness. Watch how some people keep score of their goodness, building arsenals of favors to deploy when needed. They're not giving, they're investing in future manipulation. Their kindness is a loan with crushing interest. Number 4. The kindness of self-destruction. This is martyrdom disguised as virtue. Giving until you're empty, helping until you're broken, sacrificing until there's nothing left. Society calls this noble. Nietzsche called it a slow suicide that makes everyone else complicit in your death. You know this kindness. It's staying up all night to help others while your own work suffers. It's giving money you don't have to people who waste it. It's setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, then expecting applause for the ashes. Number 5. The kindness of enablement. Perhaps the cruelest false kindness, helping people stay weak, solving problems they need to solve themselves, cushioning consequences they need to feel. This kindness appears compassionate but actually prevents growth, keeping others dependent and diminished. When you understand all these together, a pattern emerges that's both horrifying and liberating. Most of what we call kindness is actually a sophisticated system of mutual diminishment. We keep each other small through our goodness, creating a society of people who neither truly give nor truly receive. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote, "The good are unable to create, they are always the beginning of the end," because creation requires the courage to be disliked, to disrupt comfort, to choose growth over approval. The ultimate irony? True kindness, the kind that actually helps others become stronger, often looks cruel to those addicted to weakness. When you refuse to enable someone's self-pity, they'll call you heartless. When you model strength instead of joining their misery, they'll call you arrogant. When you choose your own growth over their comfort, they'll call you selfish. But this isn't cruelty. It's the deepest compassion possible. Because what truly helps someone isn't confirming their weakness, but believing in their hidden strength, not solving their problems, but trusting their ability to solve them. Not dimming your light, but showing them that brightness is possible. This isn't just about your personal freedom from false goodness. When Nietzsche looked at civilization, he saw an entire species in decline, poisoning itself with compassion, drowning in its own pity. Think about our collective obsessions: safety over adventure, comfort over growth, being nice over being real. We've built a world that rewards conformity and punishes excellence. We celebrate victims and suspect victors. We've made weakness sacred and strength suspicious. This plays out everywhere. in education systems that lower standards so no one feels bad, in relationships where honesty is sacrificed for harmony, in workplaces where innovation is crushed by the need for consensus, in a culture that medicates away discomfort rather than learning from it. We're creating what Nietzsche prophetically called the last humans, beings so committed to comfort and safety that they've lost the ability to create, to strive, to become. They'll have everything except a reason to live: perfect kindness, perfect equality, perfect meaninglessness. But here's the truly terrifying part. This isn't imposed by some external force. We're doing it to ourselves, policing each other into mediocrity through the weapon of wounded compassion. The pyramid of control isn't built from above, it's maintained from below, by those who benefit from everyone staying small. People will resist this truth because their entire identity is built on being good. To question kindness is to question who they are at the deepest level. The ego would rather die than admit it's been living a lie. Watch what happens when you start embodying these insights. Those closest to you will feel threatened first. Your strength highlights their choice to remain weak. Your authenticity exposes their performance. Your growth reminds them of their stagnation. They'll use every tool in the moral arsenal against you. Guilt. I thought you cared about others. Shame. You've become so selfish. Fear. What happened to the person I knew? These aren't observations, they're attempts to pull you back into the shared prison. It's not easy to see through this, especially when the voices come from people you love. Every fiber of your social conditioning will scream that they're right, that you're becoming bad. This is the moment of truth. Will you choose their approval or your authenticity? The resistance is so strong because the stakes are so high. If kindness can be false, if goodness can be a trap, if morality itself can be a weapon, then what can we trust? The ground itself seems to disappear. Most people would rather live a lie than face this void. But when one person awakens to this truth and has the courage to live it, something remarkable happens. They become a crack in the prison wall, letting light into places that have been dark for generations. Your refusal to play the game of false kindness gives others permission to question their own performance. Your strength reminds them that weakness isn't mandatory. Your authenticity shows them that there's life beyond the approval of others. This isn't about creating disciples or converts. It's about becoming so genuinely yourself that others remember they can do the same. It's a kind of consciousness virus, but instead of spreading weakness, it spreads the courage to be strong. Imagine a world where kindness comes from overflow rather than obligation, where help empowers rather than enables, where compassion challenges people to grow rather than confirming their limitations. This is the world Nietzsche glimpsed, not a cruel world, but one where strength and kindness aren't opposites. The network effect is already happening. Every time someone chooses growth over approval, authenticity over niceness, strength over false humility, they create a ripple. These ripples are building into waves. The old morality is crumbling not through attack, but through abandonment. People simply walking away from cages they no longer need. So how do you work with this knowledge without becoming the very thing you're trying to transcend? How do you reject false kindness without becoming genuinely cruel? Here are the 7 practices Nietzsche's philosophy points toward. Step 1. Trust your instincts about kindness. When something feels like performance rather than genuine care, it probably is. Your body knows the difference between authentic generosity and moral posturing. Stop overriding this knowledge with social programming. Step 2. Question your motives ruthlessly. Before any act of goodness, ask, am I doing this from strength or weakness? Am I giving from overflow or seeking approval? Am I helping them grow or keeping them dependent? Honest answers will transform your actions. Step 3. Embrace selective compassion. Not everyone deserves your energy. Some people are committed to their weakness and will weaponize any help you give. Learn to recognize who's ready to grow and who just wants to feed on your strength. Step 4. Practice saying no without justification. No is a complete sentence. Every time you explain, apologize, or justify your boundaries, you're asking permission to have them. True strength sets limits without seeking approval. Step 5. Transform criticism into fuel. When people call you selfish, changed, or cruel for choosing growth, see it as confirmation you're on the right path. Their discomfort with your strength is not your problem to solve. Step 6. Create from your excess. When you help, create, or give, do it from abundance rather than depletion. If kindness leaves you empty, it's not kindness. It's a sophisticated form of self-harm. Step 7. Model strength, don't preach it. The most powerful teaching is living example. Be so authentically yourself that others remember they can choose the same freedom. You stand at a crossroads that Nietzsche understood would come for anyone who truly grasped his message. Two paths stretch before you, and there's no middle ground, no comfortable compromise. One path leads back to the familiar prison of false goodness. You can close this video, dismiss these ideas as dangerous or impractical, and return to the comfort of conventional morality. You'll be welcomed back with open arms. Society needs people who follow the rules, who prioritize being nice over being real, who choose fitting in over standing out. This path is safe, approved, and leads to a life of quiet desperation dressed up as virtue. The other path leads into unknown territory. It requires you to question everything you've been taught about kindness, goodness, and morality itself. You'll have to rebuild your values from the ground up, based on what strengthens rather than what comforts. You'll lose relationships with people who need you weak. You'll face criticism from those who mistake your strength for cruelty. You'll stand alone before you stand with others who've chosen the same courage. As Nietzsche discovered in his own journey, this second path leads not to isolation but to a different kind of connection. Relationships based on mutual strength rather than shared weakness. Compassion that empowers rather than enables. A life that's genuinely yours rather than a performance for others' approval. Either way, you must choose. The one thing you cannot do is unknow what you now know. The comfortable unconsciousness is gone forever. You've seen the cage. The question is, will you walk out? When you integrate this understanding, not just intellectually, but in your bones, your choices, your daily life, everything changes. You don't become cruel. You become precise with your compassion. You don't become selfish. You become clear about what actually serves. Your relationships transform. The energy vampires disappear, unable to feed on someone who refuses to bleed. But new connections emerge. People who match your strength, who celebrate your growth, who want a companion in becoming, rather than a partner in comfortable stagnation. Your work changes. Instead of dispersing your gifts to make others comfortable, you concentrate them into something powerful. You stop apologizing for your talents and start developing them into their full expression. Most remarkably, your relationship with yourself transforms. The constant inner critic that policed your every move, ensuring you were good enough, finally falls silent. In its place comes a different voice, one that asks not, "What will they think?" but "What wants to emerge through me?" You'll discover what Nietzsche knew, that rejecting false morality doesn't make you immoral. It makes you free to discover a higher morality, one based on strength, fostering strength, creativity, nurturing creativity, life-affirming life. The guilt disappears, replaced by clarity. The people-pleasing ends, replaced by authentic presence. The constant drain stops, replaced by sustainable overflow. You become someone who gives from abundance rather than depletion, who helps others find their strength rather than confirming their weakness. Remember when I told you about Nietzsche watching that merchant in Rapallo, distributing coins while basking in gratitude? There's a detail I didn't mention. After observing this scene, Nietzsche followed one of the beggars. He watched as the man walked away, counting his coins, and then, this is the crucial part, threw half of them away in disgust. Even the receivers of false kindness know the truth, Nietzsche wrote. They taste the condescension hidden in charity, feel the chains disguised as gifts. But they play their role, because the alternative, genuine dignity, requires strength that pity has stolen from them. This is the complete picture. False kindness doesn't just diminish the giver, it destroys the receiver too. It creates a dynamic where both parties are performing a script written by those who profit from human weakness. The merchant gets to feel superior. The beggar gets coins, but loses dignity. Society gets to call this morality and wonder why everyone feels so empty. But you're not that merchant anymore, and you refuse to be that beggar. You've seen through the performance. The question now is what you'll do with this sight. You are not the same person who started watching this video. Something fundamental has shifted. You can feel it, that slight discomfort, that sense of walls falling away, that mixture of fear and exhilaration that comes when a worldview cracks open. You've joined a lineage that stretches back through every genuine revolutionary, artist, creator, and free spirit who refused to let false morality clip their wings. You're part of what Nietzsche called the free spirits, those courageous enough to think beyond good and evil, to create rather than conform, to choose strength over the comfortable weakness that society calls virtue. This isn't an elite club based on superiority. It's a natural selection based on courage, the courage to see clearly, to choose authentically, to grow regardless of others' comfort. You've proven you have this courage simply by staying with these ideas rather than fleeing back to comfortable lies. The question isn't whether you'll use this knowledge. You already are. Every interaction now carries new awareness. Every choice between authentic strength and false kindness becomes visible. You can't unsee the patterns, can't unfeel the cage bars you once called virtue. But knowing is only the beginning. The real question is, how deeply are you willing to live this truth? Will you make small adjustments, keeping one foot in the old world? Or will you risk the complete transformation that comes from fully embracing your strength? Nietzsche spent his entire life wrestling with these questions, and they drove him to create philosophy that still shakes foundations over a century later. Not because he found easy answers, but because he had the courage to keep asking dangerous questions. So I leave you with the same challenge he faced every day. In a world addicted to weakness disguised as virtue, do you have the strength to be genuinely kind? In a culture that worships victims, do you have the courage to model victory? In a society that fears human greatness, will you dare to become who you truly are?